Good morning, boys and girls. I'm here to read you another story. Today's story, I thought we would read The Smartest Giant in Town. This story is written by Julia Donaldson and it's one of our favourites. We do love Julia Donaldson stories. So, The Smartest Giant in Town. George was a giant, the scruffiest giant in town. He always wore the same old pair of old brown sandals and the same old patched-up gown. "I wish I wasn't the scruffiest giant in town," he said sadly. But one day, George noticed a new shop. It was full of smart clothes. So he bought a smart shirt, a smart pair of trousers, a smart belt, a smart stripy tie, some smart socks with diamonds up the sides, and a pair of smart shiny shoes. "Now I'm the smartest giant in town," he said proudly. George left behind his old clothes in the shop. He was about to go home when he heard a sound. On the pavement stood a giraffe who was sniffing sadly. "What's the matter?" said George. "It's my neck," said the giraffe. "It's so very long and so very cold. I wish I had a warm, long scarf." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his stripy tie. It didn't match my socks anyway," he said, as he wound it round and round the giraffe's neck. It made a wonderful scarf. "Thank you," said the giraffe. As George strode towards home, he sang to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, but look me up and down, I'm the smartest giant in town." George came to a river. On a boat stood a goat who was bleating loudly. "What's the matter?" said George. "Oh, it's my sail," said the goat. "It blew away in a storm. I wish I had a strong new sail for my boat." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his new white shirt. "It kept coming untucked anyway," he said, as he tied it to the mast of the goat's boat. It made a magnificent sail. "Thank you," said the goat. George strode on, singing to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. But look me up and down, I'm the smartest giant in town." George came to a tiny ruined house. Beside the house stood a white mouse with lots of baby mice. They were all squeaking. "What's the matter?" said George. "It's our house," squeaked the mother mouse. "It burned down and now we have nowhere to live. I wish we had a new house." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off one of his shiny shoes. "It was giving me blisters anyway," he said. As the mouse and her babies scrambled inside, the shoe made a perfect home for them. "Thank you," they squeaked. George had to hop along the road now, but he didn't mind, and as he hopped, he sang to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt is a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. But look me up and down. I'm the smartest giant in town. George came to a campsite. Beside a tent stood a fox who was crying. "What's the matter?" said George. "Oh, it's my sleeping bag," said the fox. "I dropped it in a puddle. I wish I had a warm, dry sleeping bag." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off one of his shoes with the diamonds on the side. "It was tickling my toes anyway," he said, as the fox snuggled into it. It made a very fine sleeping bag. "Thank you," said the fox. George hopped on, singing to himself. "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of my socks is a bed for a fox. But look me up and down. I'm the smartest giant in town." George came to a big squelchy bog. Beside the bog stood a dog who was howling. "What's the matter?" said George. "It's this bog," said the dog. "I need to get across, but I keep getting stuck in the mud. I wish there was a dry, safe path." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his smart new belt. "It was squashing my tummy anyway," he said as he laid it down over the bog. It made an excellent path. "Thank you," said the dog. The wind started to blow, but George didn't mind. He hopped on singing to himself. "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of my socks is a bed for a fox. My belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog. But my trousers are falling down. I'm now the coldest giant in town." Suddenly, George felt sad and shivery and not all very smart. He stood on one foot and thought, "I'll have to go back to the shop and buy some new clothes," he decided. So he turned around and he hopped all the way back to the shop. "Look, he's got spotty underpants. His trousers have fallen down." But when he got there, it was closed. "Oh no," cried George. He sank down on the doorstep and a tear ran down the end of his nose. He felt as sad as all the animals he had met on his way home. Then out of the corner of his eye, he saw a bag with something familiar poking out of the top. George took a closer look. "My gown!" he yelled. "My dear old gown and sandals." George put them on. They felt wonderfully comfortable. "Oh, I'm the cosiest giant in town," he cried, and he danced back home along the road. Outside his front door stood all the animals that he had helped. They were carrying an enormous present. "Come on, George," they said. "Open it." George untied the ribbon, and inside was a beautiful gold paper crown and a card. "Look inside the card, George," said the animals. George put the crown on his head and he opened the card. Inside it said, "Your tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. Your shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. Your shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of your socks is a bed for a fox. You're about to have a dog who was crossing a bog. So here is a very fine crown to go with the sandals and gown of the kindest giant in town. He was so kind that he gave all of his clothes to the animals so they could be helped, and he didn't have any clothes left, so they made him a crown. What a lovely, lovely story. I hope you're all staying safe, boys and girls. Mrs. Hannah misses you so much. I hope you're enjoying all my stories, and I hope to see you all very, very soon. The end.